House to now adjourn, and I call the member for Barton.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I think the House understands that this week is NAIDOC week. I particularly want to recognise your role, Mr Speaker, in making sure that the day was a success, and I really appreciate that, as we all do. I want to particularly recognise the current chairs of the NAIDOC committee nationally, Patricia Turner and John Paul Janke. But I also want to put very much on record the enormous contribution of Dr Anne Martin and Ben Mitchell, who are the past chairs of NAIDOC. I know Dr Martin spent 13 years in that position, and I think both through Anne Martin and Ben Mitchell, we saw NAIDOC grow to the amazing thing it is today, reaching across schools, local government areas, parliaments, and all aspects of life. And I wanted to particularly recognise their contribution. This year's theme, of course, as we all know, is always, always was, always will be. This is an interesting theme. Last year the theme was about recognition of women. Because of her we can. The theme this year was born out of the civil rights movement and the land rights movement. The rest of that saying is always was, always will be Aboriginal land. I want to also say that NAIDOC is not a new thing in this nation. It has a long history. We saw that in the 1920s, Aboriginal rights groups boycotted Australia Day to protest against the status quo treatment of Indigenous Australians. By the 1920s, the broader Australian public was still quite clearly largely ignorant of those boycotts. By Australia Day in 1938, the boycotts were finally noticed by the wider Australian public, with thousands marching through the streets of Sydney. In the 40s and 50s, the Day of Mourning became an annual event held on Sunday before Australia Day and was known as Aborigines Day. In 1955, Aborigines Day was shifted to the first Sunday in July, which is what now we all celebrate. It became a day to also celebrate Aboriginal culture. In 1972, as an outcome of the 1967 referendum, the Department of Aboriginal Affairs was formed, and in 1974 the NAIDOC committee was composed entirely of Aboriginal members for the first time. The National Aboriginal Day Observance Committee was formed in the early 1990s. The title was expanded to include Torres Strait Islanders. The National NAIDOC Committee was made key decisions on national celebrations each year and has representatives in most Australian states and territory. NAIDOC is now recognised by all of us as something to bring this country together, and I couldn't be prouder of that. As I said, the theme this year was, always will be. First Nation peoples have always have and always will be spiritually and culturally connected to land. They have also occupied and cared for the land for over 65,000 years. And one of the things I like to say is that this 65,000 years of story, of history, is just not the culture of first Australians. It is the story of this country, and therefore it is the history and culture of all Australians, and that's what's so wonderful about NAIDOC Committee. Mr Speaker, can I conclude my remarks today by saying that I am extremely proud and touched by the care of both sides of Parliament towards today. I am disappointed with the outcome of the flag debate in the other chamber, but it is what it is, and of course we will continue to prosecute the fact that the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander flags, if you go down Commonwealth Avenue, there are hundreds of them. If you drive into Sydney Airport, it flies. If you drive past the New South Wales Parliament, it flies. And on occasion, it actually flies off the Harbour Bridge. Not very often, but now and again. So it is in front of schools, it is in front of the War Memorial. It is something that is part of the National Flags Act of Australia. So, Mr Speaker, can I just say that flying the flag, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander flag, as I said to 2GB this afternoon, It's not meant to be a divisive thing. It is something that we can all celebrate and embrace. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.